I have been wanting to go deeper into the grieving process with you for a while now. So this week, you will be introduced to the 7 stages of grief after a breakup. And today, specifically, we will be talking about stages 1 through 4. It's so much stuff that, I can't do it all in one episode. We'd be here for a while, but I wanted to break it up for you, and we are going to dig deep. So grab a notebook and pen so you can write this stuff down. You don't want to miss it. Hey sis, welcome to Goodbye Heartbreak, Hello Healing. Are you hurt and confused after a recent breakup? Are you having thoughts like, I can't believe I'm here again. Why wasn't I enough for him? Or I'm never going to get married? Do you find yourself Googling how to get past the breakup or how to heal my broken heart? Do you start your morning feeling like you can finally breathe again, only to fall apart when you see a picture of your ex on social media? Hey sis, I'm Candace. I too was a single Christian woman who was heartbroken but still desired marriage. I too had numerous failed relationships and wished the right man would come along. I wanted closure from past relationships, healing for my heart, and I wanted to feel joy in my life again. But the truth is, I had no idea where to start or how to make any of this happen until I found the secret, partnering with God to heal from heartbreak. In this podcast, you will find tips for moving on after breakups, growing your relationship with God, and preparing for future relationships so that you will heal your heart and be ready to move forward into the life you desire. So turn off those heartbreak songs and turn me up in those earbuds. It's time to heal, sis. Hey sis, and welcome back for another episode of Goodbye Heartbreak, Hello Healing. I'm so excited that you're joining me on today. I hope that you had a good and restful and very enjoyable Thanksgiving last week. I know that I did. I enjoyed myself so much. My husband and I finally got to relax and get away from the kids for a while. So hey, that's all I can ask for at this moment. So before we jump into it, because we have a lot to talk about today, make sure you subscribe to the podcast. Make sure you leave your 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. Those things really help the show, and it helps others just like you to find the show. Also, we talked about it last week. I apologize to you guys so much because we didn't do the Black Friday sale like we were supposed to. But we are having a cyber sale this week, okay? So Grieving the Living, my course that is worth, oh my goodness. Okay, so it is worth and valued at over $900, right? And it has been on sale for $297. And so right now, this week for Cyber Week, y'all cannot beat this deal, okay? You can now get my Ecourse, Grieving the Living, for only $37, y'all. $37. That's it. That's not a payment. That is the cost. Okay, so go quickly. I have a link for you in the show notes. I would tell you the site name, but it has not worked well for me when I tried to just type it in. So do use the link in the show notes to purchase the course. If you need me to email it to you, email me at contact@candaceabaddies.com. I will gladly email you that link, but make sure that you use the link and use the coupon code CYBER2024 at checkout, and you will get it for only $37, y'all. And you're going to want it. And you're going to see why after we start talking about these stages of grief on today. So right now you might be thinking, sis, why are we talking about grief? Nobody died. But here's the question, okay? I think some people just don't know. And it's like, do we grieve after a breakup? Okay, we absolutely do. We often associate grief with death of a person. But grief, in its simplest term, is just simply a response to loss. So if you lost a relationship, you can grieve it. You can grieve anyone or anything that you were deeply connected to. So absolutely, you can grieve the loss of your relationship, the loss of your ex, the loss of the future that you thought you would have with him. Like all of those things are things that you lost. And so you can grieve. And that's a lot to grieve, right? That is a lot to grieve. And so today, like I said, we're going to jump on in. I have 7 stages of grief that I have laid out for you guys. And as I stated before, it is a lot of information. So we're only going to go through the first 4 stages on today. So let's jump into it. So before we dive into the stages themselves, I want you to know that it's important to note that the process of grieving is not linear, meaning it's not just going from one stage numerically to the other. You're not going to just go stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, okay? These stages can overlap, they can repeat themselves, and you can be in multiple stages at the same time. So it's not just a straight line. How I wish it was. It would probably be a whole lot easier if it was, but it's not. It's not a linear process. And I also want to point out that you should not try to skip stages or rush through them instead of working through them, okay? Working through them is so important. There's no timeline on grief, okay? So just like grief of anything else, you shouldn't try to rush. There's no set time. I can't tell you how long you will be in the process of grieving. I can't tell you how long you will be in a particular stage. You may want it to be over right now, but skipping stages will likely only prolong your process. Okay. So, if you try to just rush through it instead of working through it, you will likely just make things harder and longer. It's basically what I'm saying. So take your time, actually go through the process, actually work the process itself and see better results for your life. All right. Now let's get into it. Stage 1 is denial or shock. Okay, so at this stage, you deny things are actually happening. You're like, you know what? The thought is this isn't happening. And shock is like the thought that you ask yourself, is this really happening? Like, I can't believe it's happening. It's shocking you. And so this tends to happen right after the breakup occurs. And you might be in denial because you feel like you can't live without your ex, or because you think the situation is too painful to deal with. It's just a way for you to kind of escape dealing with it. It's a coping mechanism, essentially, to kind of just, your brain is trying to process it all and you can't. Or maybe you're overcome with emotions and it's just too much for you to handle at the moment. So instead of dealing with it or getting help to deal with it, you try to deny it. You try to deny that it's actually happening. And so, so first let me say this. In the course, Grieving the Living, we do stage 1 and 2 all in week 1 because they go hand in hand. You will likely find yourself in both of these stages at the same time at some point. And so I'm going to go into that before we start talking more about what these stages are. So stage 2 is desperate for answers. It's exactly what it sounds like. You want answers. You want to know why he did what he did. Why did he do that? Why did he make the decisions that he made? Like, why did he choose to walk away from this relationship instead of fighting for it, fighting for me? I had those questions whenever I experienced my breakup. That was one of my big ones. I was like, I can't believe he didn't fight for us. I can't believe, I felt like I meant nothing to him. So why didn't you fight for us? And so you might have your own set of questions. You might want to know, why did he cheat on you? You might want to know, why did he choose her over you? There are multiple questions that you might have that you feel like you need answered in this stage of grief. And typically, you're usually looking for closure in all the wrong places. So remember a while back, I created this episode. It's some people's favorite episode, but it's probably around episode 8 or 9. I'd have to go back and check. I'll probably link that one. But it's talking about, shattering the myth of needing closure. And so this is probably the time where you're going to be seeking closure the most because you're trying to understand what happened. And so what tends to happen in these first 2 stages is that you get stuck in a cycle that I call the denial desperate cycle. So basically the cycle is you deny it's over, you look for answers, then you gain clarity, you'll feel some pain, and then it starts over because you want to deny the pain. You want to deny what's happening. You can find yourself stuck in this denial desperate cycle. Now you might say, oh sis, that sounds terrible. And it is. It actually is terrible. And the longer you stay stuck in that cycle, the longer you're going to stay in the beginning stages of grief. That's prolonged grief. And so you might say, sis, how long does this cycle last? Well, totally, that depends upon you. It depends on how you handle it. Are you able to break that cycle? Are you able to bring yourself out of it? So there's something in the middle of this cycle that is feeding and strengthening this cycle. And, we talk about it in the course. And so you have to learn how to replace what we call the nucleus of that cycle, the nucleus of your life, so that it won't continue to gain momentum and gain power and strengthen and, kind of take over your life in a sense. It can get that strong, and you can find yourself just constantly in having these racing thoughts going back and forth in this cycle. So we talk about how to break this cycle by switching out the nucleus and engaging in different healing activities throughout the course. And so you start getting information and tools in week 1 of my course of how to change your nucleus, how to pray, process your emotions, and so much more. So literally from the jump, you're going to start learning about what these stages of grief are, but you're also going to get some tools to help you through those stages. So that's just a really important thing. I know, I've already said a mouthful, but it's really important that you know how to get through these stages, right? And it may look terrifying, but here's the thing. If you find yourself in either of these stages, 1, it's important to be honest with yourself about where you are. And 2, you have to work through the stages so you don't get stuck in them. All right. The last thing you want to do is to get stuck right here, because there's so much more work to do. And again, I know it sounds scary. It sounds like a lot, but it's a lot of work to do, but it is worth your time. It is worth your effort to actually go through these stages. All right. So there's so many people in this world right now, unfortunately, who are stuck in grief because they simply gave up in the midst of the process. Don't let that be you. Go through the entire grieving process so that you can come out healed, whole, better, ready for what's next. Because when you get stuck, it affects your entire life. It affects your future. It affects future relationships that I know that you desperately desire at this time, but I want to see more for you. I want to see better things for you. So it's important to really go through the process of grieving. Stage 3 is bargaining. Okay. So this is my definition. Okay. These are my definitions of bargaining. 1 is trying to get something you want in exchange for something you have. All right. So just an exchange, bargain. We've been doing it all our lives in one way or another. We are bargaining for things all the time. But more specifically, when it comes to a relationship ending and bargaining afterwards, this is my other definition. It is your willingness to give up yourself, your needs, your wants, desires, and or possessions to satisfy another person so they will be in a relationship with you. Let that sink in. I'm going to repeat it. I'm going to run it back one more time. It is your willingness to give up yourself, your needs, your wants, desires, and or possessions to satisfy another person so they will be in a relationship with you. So I know I'm going to speak on behalf of myself. I would have been too proud to admit that I was bargaining to be in a relationship with someone. But essentially, I tried it. And we have to be honest with ourselves. We really, really do. So when I talk about bargaining in the course, Grieving the Living, I'll try to break it down to really explain why you might bargain, who you are bargaining with, what you are bargaining for, your common emotions in this stage of bargaining, and common behaviors of what you might do in this stage. And so we really break that down. We really talk about it and go through it so that you can, 1, have a very good understanding of what this actually looks like and whether or not you're engaging in this. And so the journal prompts in this stage requires real transparency with yourself. And I advise you to be brutally honest with yourself because, like I said, when I was going through this, I was kind of ashamed to realize that I was at that point of actually bargaining for someone to love me, for someone to be in a relationship with me. But it was where I was at. And if you find yourself there, there's no shame in that, but you have to be honest and identify that in order to work through it. Now, in addition to that, there are two crises that sometimes arise during this stage, and that would be the identity crisis and the crisis of faith. And so we address both of these things in my course as well, and we talk about how you work through each one of these crises, okay? And then if you find yourself in stage 3, you want to get to the point where you stop bargaining, okay? If you find yourself in this stage of bargaining, you want to get to that place where you would stop doing it. And so you have to do that. You have to ask yourself some hard questions, okay? And as I said earlier, it takes you being brutally honest. You have to identify your bargaining threshold, and I'll talk about what that is in the course as well. And you have to fight the urge to bargain, and I tell you how to do that too. And so all of these things are really important. And if you can come up with this stuff on your own, by all means do that. But we have it all laid out for you in Grieving the Living. So those are things that need to be done to stop this bargaining. And then I also want to talk about this stage 4 while we're here, because it's called relapse. And sometimes you will find yourself in these two stages at the same time. And so in my course, in week 1, we talk about stages 1 and 2. We talk about denial or shock, and we talk about desperate for answers, where in week 2, we pair these next two stages, which is bargaining that we just talked about, and now relapse, which we're about to talk about, because again, you will find yourself in these two stages at the same time, possibly. All right. So in the course, I listed the Merriam-Webster definition of relapse, which is simply to slip or fall back into a former or worse state. To slip or fall back into a former or worse state. So relapse, just think about relapse when we talk about anything. You're actually going back to a prior stage that you've already come out of, basically, okay? And so there's a danger zone for relapse, okay? And there are two ways that I kind of talk about in the course that you can relapse. And one is that you relapse back into that relationship, or you will relapse back into a previous stage of grief. And so in my course, we talk about both types of relapses and how they can happen and what they look like. So you can find yourself going back again into that relationship at a time where you probably shouldn't, or you'll find yourself going back to a previous stage of grief that you've already dealt with. And it's largely affected by the outcome of bargaining. And so y'all, this is all really just tied in. Again, it's a lot of information. And one thing, how you handle one stage will affect the stages to come. So it's really important to work through all of this. And then we talk about the possibility of reconciliation. I do talk about that because that's a common question people have after a breakup. They want to know, first of all, a lot of people want to get back together with their ex. They don't like the fact that they broke up and they would rather be in a relationship with them. And so they always ask about the possibility of them getting back together. Should they? Could they? So I give some guidance on what to consider and questions to ask. It's not a huge focus of the course, but it is something that I address just because people have questions about it. And then you can find yourself in a new cycle if you make it to the bargaining stage and find yourself relapsing back into that relationship. Okay, so this cycle is called the breakup relapse cycle, which is an extension of the first cycle that we talked about. Okay, the denial, desperate for answers cycle. Okay, so it's an extension of that one. And just like all cycles, it can repeat itself until you break it. Have you ever been in an on and off again relationship? You're on one day, you're off the next day. You're on for a week, you're off for a week. You make it good for a while, and all of a sudden y'all break up again. Like, have you ever been in one of those types of relationships? I have been in several on again, off again relationships, okay? And it can be toxic. And so that's what relapse is like. Like, you will get out of that relationship, make it through some stages of grief, and then bargain your way and relapse right back into that relationship, and then find yourself having to start the grieving process all over again. It's a toxic cycle. Again, it is a very toxic cycle. But there is a way, all right? There are ways to resist the relapse, all right? To resist relapsing back to that relationship, to resist relapsing back to a previous stage of grief. You can prevent it. And some people, there are people who never relapse and they continue through the entire grieving process, which I think is amazing, right? But you do have to work at it. There's some work involved to be able to really go through this process without relapsing. It's easy, y'all. It is so easy to relapse in this process. And so you have those people who never relapse, right? They prevent it altogether. And then there are some people who relapse, but they're able to overcome the relapse and break the cycle, okay? And then continue moving through the stages, because there's no shame here if you do relapse. Trust me, I get it. I don't want to see it, but I get it. And so the point is that just if you relapse, all hope isn't lost, right? If you find yourself having to come through this again, unfortunately, then you can still have hope to make it through this entire grieving process. And so we talk about how to value yourself, establish your why, and surrender in order to prevent and break the cycle of relapse. Okay, so that's so important. Like those things I go into detail about in stage 4. That's week 2 of my course, where we really kind of break that down, because we want you to be able to resist it. We want you to resist the relapse, and that way you be able to go on and continue through all the stages of grief, hopefully to the end, because again, some people will get so far and they just decide to quit. And I know it's not easy. These 4 stages we have talked about, y'all, they're the time when you're having this excruciating pain, right? And you're so confused, you have so many questions, and it's so much to work through, so much to process, right? And you're just trying to keep your head above water, so to speak. But you can do it. You absolutely can do it. It's harder to do it alone. It's harder to do it by yourself, which is why I created the course, because I wanted to give you a guide in doing this and working through this process. But if you don't want the course, again, you can still do it. It might take you longer because you don't have the guide and you don't have the roadmap, and that's perfectly fine. But if you really want to figure out what is happening, because you might be feeling like, I don't even know what's going on, since I have feelings that I don't even understand. I don't know why I'm doing this. I don't know what's happening. You may not even realize you're dealing with identity crisis or crisis of faith. You're just like, something is going on and I don't know what. So this is the perfect time. If you want to jump into this course, go ahead and do it. It's 4 weeks long. It will take you through each stage step by step. We will give you tools. There are lots of journal prompts in here to help you process your thoughts along with processing your emotions. We talk about a lot of healing activities, developing your daily healing plan. We talk about a lot of stuff in here, and it's a lot to process, but you'll be so glad that you did. And so I want you to be healed, and grieving is a great, big, gigantic part of the healing process. It really, really is. And so I encourage you to do so if you really want to see yourself healed and whole. All right. So let me recap these 4 stages of grief that we've gone over so far. It is denial or shock, number 1. Stage 2 is desperate for answers. Stage 3 is bargaining. And stage 4 is relapse. All right. So those are the first 4 stages of grief. They are some difficult stages to get through, but you can do it. If you want to get the course, if you want to hop on in, again, it's only $37 right now. Click that link in the show notes for Grieving the Living and use the coupon code CYBER2024 to get it for this great price. It will only last until Thursday, so go ahead and do it now before you forget. I do not want this sale to pass you by. Go ahead, snag it, grab it, jump in, and let me tell you, start your process now. Do not stop. Don't get bored. Don't say it's too much. Don't give an excuse. Don't, just don't. Just don't. All right. I want you to stick with it. Get through this process and you will have support along the way. So don't worry about that as well. You get support along the way. You can always ask questions. There's so much to help you here. All right. So I love y'all so much. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Keep your eyes and ears open on Thursday as we go through the last 3 stages of grief. and you can really see what it's all about. All right. I love you so much. I'll talk to you again this week. Bye, sis. Hey, sis. Listen, if you have been blessed, changed, or inspired by this podcast in any way, please subscribe to the podcast and leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. This is the #1 way that you can thank me and show support for the show. Also, if this podcast blessed you, don't keep it to yourself. Do a quick share and bless someone else. Please know I am so grateful for each and every one of you, and I would love to hear from you. Come connect with me and other like-minded individuals in my Facebook group called Christian Women Overcoming Heartbreak and Finding Purpose. I can't wait to meet you back here really soon. Until then, remember to love the life you have while you're making it better. Love you, sis.